In 2015, the Japanese automaker Nissan competed at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which marked the return to the top-level category Les Arts for the first time in almost 2 decades. However, their attendance went fairly unrecognized, as Nissan's prototype cars came away without any achievements. And the race was honestly a complete disaster, prompting some to call their program a complete failure. But was it actually a failure? And what if I told you that this LMP1 car had a completely different design compared to all the other models we would see out on track? Well, in this video, I'll be explaining this subject, as I break down the story of the disastrous Nissan LMP1 program at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. 10 years ago, the LMP1 regulations used in the World Endurance Championship were producing the most technologically advanced prototypes we had ever seen in endurance racing thus far, with manufacturers even creating some cars that could rival the technology used in Formula 1 cars of the era. With a couple of established car manufacturers already having programs based around the LMP1 rule set, soon it was confirmed that Nissan would become the next manufacturer to get involved with the LMP1 regulations, and this would ultimately mark their return to the top category at Le Mans, with the brand hoping to achieve major success. When we think about Japanese car manufacturers at this event, typically the brands which come to mind first are Toyota and Mazda. Mazda for their iconic overall victory with the 787B in 1991, and Toyota for their recent dominance at Les Arts from 2018 to 2022. But besides Toyota and Mazda, Nissan was another Japanese manufacturer that raced in this event, and in fact, as I alluded to, they secured some achievements in the past. Nissan was actually the first Japanese constructor to secure the overall pole at Le Mans. In 1990, Nissan arguably had one of the quickest cars in the event, the R90CK. In qualifying, driver Mark Blundell set a 3-minute 27.020 in his Nissan R90CK. However, the lap time is not really a key factor I want to focus on, as it's more about the speed the car was traveling, as in fact the British racer clocked in 226.9 miles per hour or 366 kilometers per hour on the Mulsanne Straight, and that became a record, which interestingly is still upheld today, with the R90CK recording the fastest top speed on the Mulsanne Straight following the addition of the 2 chicanes that very same year. Another successful achievement for Nissan came in 1998, when they got on the overall podium with the Nissan R390 GT1, which achieved 3rd overall just behind the winning Porsche entries. And fast forward to almost 2 decades later, and the Yokoyama-based company were ready to return to top-level endurance racing. To go back to Le Mans, Nissan would need to build a car that would not just rival their competitors, but beat them too. But they also wanted to build a car that would be completely different to their opposition. And so eventually, Nissan decided on a very unique design compared to other brands. And when I mean different, I mean really different. Nissan decided to build an LMP1 car which would be front-wheel drive, and had a lot of aerodynamic focus on the front section of the car, which was very uncommon in modern high-performance prototypes. For example, cars like the new Porsche 919 Hybrid would be based on a rear to mid-wheel drive platform. One of the reasons why Nissan chose to build an LMP1 car which was front-wheel drive and had the majority of aerodynamics in the front was because of the FIA's new technical regulations, which affected the aerodynamics at the back of the car, which was something Nissan were hoping to take advantage of with this unique design. The chief designer of the LMP1 car was Ben Bowlby, and he was also the person behind the Nissan Delta Wing project, which saw a car with very different features compared to other prototypes compete, and it raced at events like the 2012 24 Hours of Le Mans. But to be clear, that was a car participating in a different capacity, where the LMP1 car from the Japanese brand was planned to compete for overall wins. Bowlby suggested that some LMP1 cars with mid to rear wheel drive designs had limitations because of the new FIA regulations, which prevented effective aerodynamics in areas such as the rear wing. Although there weren't that many restrictions on the aerodynamics at the front of the car, and keep in mind, the aim with the Nissan prototype was to have a unique, successful, and sustainable entry. And so, for their LMP1 car, the brand decided to focus on taking advantage of the rear aero downsides and having a car that was front-wheel drive and had more front-end downforce, which, as I explained, was something regulations weren't as focused on compared to the rearward aero designs. Obviously though, weight distribution would be a problem, so Nissan elected to do something different with the engine too. Where brands like Audi and Porsche would have mid to rear engined P1 cars, Nissan's LMP1 would have the internal combustion engine placed to the front, and the powertrain would be a 3.0 liter twin turbocharged V6 engine, developed by Nissan and Cosworth, with the placement and type of the powertrain planning to help with fuel efficiency. Nissan also chose to have different tire dimensions at the front and the back, with larger tires at the front and smaller ones at the rear. And according to Ben Bowlby, these tire decisions would help with the drag reduction. Ultimately, after this car was announced to the public, the innovative design from Nissan was seen as potentially revolutionary for the future of LMP1 cars, with some analysts predicting it could be a genius move and propel Nissan to the top of the timesheets in the World Endurance Championship. However, while this was a bold and courageous move, it proved to be heavily problematic as well, as I'll explain later on. Nissan planned to join the motorsport scene in 2015 with this unique LMP1 car, and compete across the full season of the World Endurance Championship with 2 cars, and a third entry would come for the 24 Hours of Le Mans exclusively. And this therefore meant that the Japanese marque would become the 4th car manufacturer on the grid in LMP1, alongside Audi, Porsche, and fellow Japanese brand Toyota. The car began testing at the Nissan Technology Center in the US state of Arizona, with the first official test of 2015 being at the Circuit of the Americas, where the drivers did lots of testing in preparation for the start of this brand new journey. Speaking of the drivers for the car, let's talk more about them. Arguably the most popular of the drivers selected to pilot the GTR LM Nismo was Jan Mardenborough, not because of his racing success, but because of his background story. Mardenborough joined from the world of sim racing, following his win of Nissan's GT Academy Challenge on the popular racing video game Gran Turismo 5, which offered Mardenborough a chance to race a Nissan car in real life. After multiple starts in Nissan racing cars, eventually the sim racer turned real-life racing competitor got selected to pilot the GTR LM Nismo at the legendary 24 Hours of Le Mans, alongside fellow Nissan Academy racers Lucas Ordonez and Mark Szulzicki, and they would be joining 6 more racers that Nissan had selected, which I will talk about in just a moment. However, the start to the 2015 season was not what Nissan were hoping for, as they would unfortunately fail the FIA crash test, which resulted in them missing the season opener of the 6 Hours of Silverstone, which was won by their opponents Audi with their R18 e-tron Quattro. Therefore, the team of Nissan Motorsports took the time to do more testing in preparation for the car's debut at the iconic 24 Hours of Le Mans in 2015. And they also decided to run the cars at Le Mans without a hybrid component, unlike their opponents Porsche, Audi, and Toyota. Nissan would bring all 3 of their GTR LM Nismo entries for the debut of this new LMP1 car at this 24-hour endurance race, and the entries would use the numbers 21, 22, and 23. First up would be the number 21 car, which would sport a special livery as a callback to Nissan's iconic Group C prototypes, which won multiple events. This number 21 entry would be piloted by Lucas Ordonez, Mark Szulzicki, and 2-time Super GT champion Sugio Matsuda. Then there would be the number 22 Nissan, which would statistically have the most experienced driver lineup from Nissan Motorsports, with the racers including Alex Buncombe, now Aston Martin hypercar racer Harry Tincknell, and 2011 FIA Group 1 champion Michael Crum. Finally, the number 23 car would be driven by ex-Formula 1 racer Max Chilton, who would be joined alongside Olivier Pla and fan favorite Jan Mardenborough. In the LMP1 class, Nissan planned to go up against 3 cars each from Audi and Porsche, alongside 2 entries from fellow Japanese automakers Toyota. Alongside the big manufacturers' cars, the GTR LM Nismo entries would also have to compete with the privateer LMP1 cars from the smaller teams of Rebellion Racing and Baikalus. The start to the 24 Hours of Le Mans weekend for Nissan, though, was a complete nightmare. The team's cars were not only unable to fight with the rivaling cars from Porsche, Audi, and Toyota, but they were simply uncompetitive. Nissan qualified at the very back of the LMP1 field, with the fastest GTR LM being 20 seconds slower than Neil Johnny's pole-sitting Porsche 919 Hybrid, and the number 21 Nissan even qualified with a slower lap time than the fastest LMP2 car. Because of this performance, Nissan's cars, as well as the Baikalus LMP1, were regulated to the rear of the prototype field for failing to achieve a lap that was in a certain amount of time to the pole-sitting LMP1 entry. In the race, the Nissan entries stayed uncompetitive, but even worse, they were also unreliable, which is the exact opposite factor you need in a race with such magnitude as the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Before this race even began, Jan Mardenborough's number 23 Nissan had to go into the garage with clutch issues, which lost the car many laps, but it was able to return later on in the race and continue to compete. However, Nissan's weekend at Le Mans continued to show the struggles of the new GTR LM Nismo. But keep in mind that this was the very first race for an LMP1 car that was brand new to the racing scene, where the cars from Porsche, Audi, and Toyota had been racing for a while now. Plus, Nissan's car was without a hybrid and was a completely new concept for an LMP1 car, as technologically advanced as these entries. Soon, the number 21 Nissan hit trouble when Matsuda pulled the car off at Ornage with a suspension failure, which was pretty much game over for this entry in this event. Later on, the number 22 Nissan also hit troubles, as during the night, the car got major damage from hitting a wheel on the Mulsanne Straight, which forced the car into the garage, but thankfully it was able to return later on. With one car down and reliability and competitiveness still proving problematic, Nissan Motorsports were now just trying to get to the end of the race with their 2 remaining entries. But that unfortunately wouldn't happen for the number 23 car, as Jan Mardenborough would stop the car at the Porsche curves with a gearbox failure in the morning at Le Mans, and eventually the car was forced to retire. Thankfully, after this disastrous event for the new entry, Nissan did get the number 22 car to the checkered flag in this 2015 venue, which was an accomplishment for the team who worked so hard to come here with this new project. However, the entry would not be classified in the official results because it was so far back compared to the winning Porsche 919 Hybrid. There's no easy way of saying this. Nissan's LMP1 adventure at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 2015 was a complete and utter disaster, and ultimately that fateful weekend would set the precedent for the future of this program. After the disaster in France, Nissan wouldn't compete in any more WEC races across the 2015 season. And later on, the car would complete one more test in December of that year, ahead of a potential comeback in 2016. But before a return could happen, Nissan ended the program altogether, and thus the GTR LM Nismo story would be cut short. Following the 2015 WEC season and the discontinuation of the GTR LM program, Nissan continued to compete in endurance racing events with their GT3 racing program, although they never built another LMP1 car again, but they did return to prototype racing. About 1.5 years after the events of the 2015 Le Mans, Nissan partnered with French constructor Ligier to introduce a car for the new 2017 DPI regulations in IMSA. Unlike the GTR LM, Nissan's next prototype program they were involved in gave them major success, this time though on the North American side of sports car racing. Across the 2017 and 2018 seasons of the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, the Ligier Nissan DPI secured 4 overall wins in IMSA, including overall victory at the 12 Hours of Sebring in 2018. However, while winning the 12 Hours of Sebring is a brilliant achievement, it's not the same as winning Le Mans, and unfortunately Nissan were never able to do that, because since 2015, the Japanese manufacturer has never returned to the iconic French endurance race. This car was truly completely different to all the other LMP1 models. Its front-wheel drive and front-engine platform, fascinating aerodynamics, and other distinct characteristics made this car a unique LMP1, the likes we never saw again in that era. This was a bold idea from Nissan, with expectations to beat rivals Porsche, Audi, and Toyota, and find some sort of loophole in the new FIA regulations, which gave hope for a return to winning ways for Nissan in prototype endurance racing. We have to remember that the 2015 24 Hours of Le Mans race was the first and only race the GTR LM raced at, and what it needed was honestly just more time and tweaks to the design, which was actually something the Nissan LMP1 team were working towards, as a potential 2016 return was on the horizon. For example, they were preparing to reintroduce the hybrid system on the GTR LM for a return in 2016. Ultimately though, with the program cut short, Nissan were never able to return to the podium at Le Sarthe like they did in 1998. Which was just a huge shame, because this LMP1 program had such big potential when the concept was first unveiled. So, the Nissan GTR LM Nismo. Was it a complete failure? Was the unique design just too bold? And will this Japanese automaker ever compete at the 24 Hours of Le Mans again? Well, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this short-lived LMP1 program in the comments below.